Hi, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to rank the John Carpenter movies, my 10 favourite John Carpenter movies. I've loved John Carpenter ever since I can remember. I think I watched The Fog when I was 10 years old and it scared the hell out of me. And since then I was obsessed with Carpenter. I was obsessed with his visual styling, his pacing, his editing, the beautiful soundtracks, those kind of classic synth soundtracks, and the way he used the music and sound. And for a sci-fi horror fan like myself, the subject matter of Carpenter's films was often catnip. He was covering all the subjects that I wanted to cover. And so he's been one of my favourite directors for the longest time, so this ranking is great fun for me. So let's get on with it. Now, at number 10 is a little known Carpenter film. This was a TV movie he made in the 70s. Some of those American TV movies, they're really good, they're worth checking out. And this is one of my favourites. It's basically John Carpenter ripping off Hitchcock. There's a woman living in a tower block, very 70s tower block, with lots of very 70s furnishings. I like that. And opposite her is this guy, this peeping Tom is watching her through this lens, and then he starts phoning her and threatening her. And it's really Hitchcock. It's a blatant rip-off, and Carpenter doesn't hide it. It stars Lauren Hutton, who was a great beauty at the time, and was noted for her dent de bonheur, as the French say. A gap in her teeth. And I had a big thing about her at that age for some strange reason. And she's very good in it, and it's great fun. If you like 70s Americanness, this is a great movie. It's great fun. And Carpenter just delivers all the compelling scares and suspense that you'd expect from Hitchcock. So if you've never seen this film, grab it. It's now out on Blu-ray, as you can see. It's very, very good fun. At number 9 is In the Mouth of Madness. Now, I would say, pound for pound, this movie is a failure. It doesn't quite work, but it's a very interesting failure, and it has some of the most interesting sequences in Carpenter's whole work. I think the reason why this film doesn't work is because it goes into territory that I don't think is really Carpenter-esque. It's Lovecraft territory, H.P. Lovecraft, who was an American writer who wrote really lurid, feverish, strange tales where these ancient gods came back from this other dimension to take over the world. And in this film, this writer, this horror writer, a bit like Stephen King, he can write novels that change the world and change people. And Sam Neill, who anchors the film very well, I think, is this journalist or publisher who goes to see him and find out what's going on. The movie is very atmospheric. It has some great surreal sequences. Watch out for the old man tied up behind a hotel desk. The set pieces are not quite as sharp as in Carpenter's early work. And I don't think that the sort of apocalyptic nature of Lovecraft, the mystical nature of Lovecraft, really suits Carpenter's style. But I think there's some really great sequences here. It's got a wonderful ending. And it's well worth your time if you've never seen it. It's just before Carpenter goes into decline, but I think it's well worth watching. Now at number 8, don't all jump on me at once. I know I'm going to get hate for this. Ghosts of Mars. Oh yeah. I love this film. I don't care who knows it. Most people think it's Carpenter's worst film. They're wrong. It is Carpenter's last great film. It's where Carpenter comes home. Carpenter once said in an interview, and I agree with him, that his films are all westerns. And this film is a western with knobs on. Basically, the sheriff, in this case played by Natasha Henstridge, on Mars, goes to a town where they've lost communication with the town. And they go in, and the town is being mobbed by these horrible people who look like zombies from the band Kiss. I don't know why. And there's a bad guy. The local bad guy has been locked up in the prison. And the sheriff and the bad guy realise that they've got to band together to get rid of these horrible zombies. It's pure classic Western territory on Mars. But that's not what I like about this movie. What I like about the movie is the way it's edited and the way it's put together. It's an unreliable narrator story. So Natasha Henstridge is telling this story to a tribunal after all the events have occurred. But she's a drug addict. And there are many times when she doesn't know what happened. Many important parts of the narrative are missing, and she relies on other people's narration. But what's her relationship to those other people? What's her relationship to the villain? Is she in cahoots with the villain, which is suggested? And the movie is edited in this kind of woozy way. There's lots of dissolve edits. So there's not the sharp definition that you associate with Carpenter. And the whole thing adds up to a kind of fun, bit of sleight of hand. What are we really watching here? What's the truth? How come the Doctor character in the story ends up, just dropping into the story literally from a balloon? It's a Shaggy Dog story. And we can never be sure of what's true and what isn't. I've written about this film at length, and I'm going to put a link at the bottom into my piece of writing about this film and why I like it so much. It has one major flaw, and that is Ice Cube is miscast, and so is Jason Statham. If you switch them round, the film would be a lot better. Number 7, Escape from New York. Kurt Russell as Snake Plissken, Lee Van Cleef, Donald Pleasence as a president, the fantastic idea of New York as a great big prison, Adrian Barbeau, Harry Dean Stanton, brilliant music, wonderful visual styling. I don't really think I've got much else to say about this film that hasn't been said. It's just a fantastic early 80s action movie. It's intelligent, it's wry, it's funny, it looks gorgeous. I just love it. Number 6, Prince of Darkness. Forgive an old horror fan, this might not be as good as some of the movies I've already spoken about, but I'm very fond of it. It's an apocalyptic movie where, it's one of those kind of films like The Omen where the devil's coming back. The devil in this case takes the form of a big can of green goo. That's one of the things I love about this film. You're supposed to be terrified of this big canister of green goo, which is in this church, in this sort of rundown area of this American city. And the devil character, the Prince of Darkness character, surrounds this church with homeless people who he's turned mad. It's a great setup. It's a bonkers setup. Donald Pleasence right in the centre of it. A lot of other not-so-good actors around him. This movie is just... It's just an indulgence, really. It's great fun. It has some great sequences. Again, I love the ending. It's just a great combination of horror and sci-fi in this sort of Nigel Neal tradition. It's great fun. Number 5, Halloween. Intriguingly, the only film on this list I've just realised that I haven't replaced with a Blu-ray, even though I love it to pieces. Okay, Halloween, if I was going to run a film course on how to make a film, this is the film I would base it around. This film is like a machine. It's like a clockwork machine, like that box in Hellraiser. It's just so logical and perfect. There's not a single bit of fat on this film. Every scene goes into the next. There's no scene that is unnecessary or is flabby. And it's just a perfect exercise in cranking up tension, in delivering the narrative as succinctly and economically as possible. And it hits every dramatic beat it wants to hit. It's got a great early performance from Jamie Lee Curtis anchoring the film. It's also got Donald Pleasence in great mystic mode. The choice of the town is perfect and it's beautifully filmed. I think the photography by Dean Cundy is the great unspoken, aspect of Carpenter's filmmaking. And that's what I've got to say about Halloween, really. I just want to make a little point here. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. This is despised by Halloween fans. I mention it because really it's a Carpenter film in all but name. It was nominally directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, who was Carpenter's assistant, but really it's a Carpenter film. He was a producer on it. And this has got all of Carpenter's, virtues. It's also... people dismiss this because it hasn't got Mike Myers in it. But if you go back and watch it, it's a great little film in its own right. It really is. It's got a great script by Nigel Neal, great idea. This sort of Irish pagan wizard is going to kill all the children on Earth by making them wear Halloween masks that turn them into frogs and scorpions and toads. It's great. It really is fun. It's a very silly film with the great Tom Atkins leading it. And I'd advise Halloween fans, go back and check it out again. If you like Carpenter, you'll love it. The synths, the visuals, everything is right on point. Now at number 4 is Assault on Precinct 13. This is the movie that made Carpenter. This was the first of the Carpenter brand. He started with Dark Star, which was this kind of student goofy comedy. It was a piss take of 2001: A Space Odyssey. Some people think it's funny and like it. I must admit I never did. I found it really boring. It's very indulgent. It's very slow paced. It's got a couple of good gags in it, but they're stretched out to infinity. This is where Carpenter begins. What I was talking about earlier, that the idea that Carpenter's films are all westerns, this is an urban western that uses Rio Bravo as its template. An officer goes to a precinct at night that's closing down. A man has just, I think he kills a gang member and goes for refuge in this prison, and the gang surround the prison and lay it under siege. And suddenly this police officer finds that he's fighting for his life, along with the prisoner in the jail, this deadly bastard who he has to sort of make friends with, just as in Ghosts of Mars. It's all coming back, all the same thing. And this is where all of Carpenter's themes begin. That idea of the hero and the villain teaming up, the idea of people being under siege, the idea of the black guy becoming a hero and teaming up with a white guy. That's something you find in many Carpenter films. All that would be called woke now. Carpenter was doing it in the 1970s. He was way before you guys. This is a great movie. Interestingly, when it first came out in America, no one thought it was very interesting. It's when it came to Europe, when it played at film festivals, that people started to say, actually, there's something really interesting here. This is a good movie and a really great director. And that's when Carpenter began. Just a little interesting piece of historical info there. But this is a really great movie. The music is fantastic. There are moments, the fantastic siege with silencers, great moments. This is a really good film if you've never seen it. At number 3, They Live. Now, if you'd said to me 20 years ago that I'd be putting this at number 3 on my John Carpenter list, I would not have believed you, but now I couldn't put it any lower. This movie is not just a good action sci-fi movie. It is probably the most prescient film of its era. This film predicted the political culture and internet culture that we now live in, the era of the conspiracy theory. This is the ultimate conspiracy theory movie. And I would even go as far to say is that this is a template of how so many people in our society now think. This movie is about this wrestler played by Roddy Piper. He plays this down-and-out guy who finds out that the world is being run by aliens in this kind of elite who are using the media and radio and television to send us subliminal messages, to tell us to obey, to conform, to have babies, to buy things, And Piper finds this sect, this underground sect, that are making these sunglasses, and if you put them on, you can see this. So you look at magazines and it says obey. You look at advertising hoardings and it says conform, It's the ultimate conspiracy theory film. Before all this stuff became fashionable and became, the daily grind of the internet, it was here. Carpenter predicted it in this little cheap sci-fi action movie. And that's one of the reasons why this movie is so great and so important. It also has a fantastic sequence where two guys, I believe they're both wrestlers in real life, or ex-wrestlers, have this fantastic fight sequence in a back alleyway, which goes on for about 8 minutes. It's great fun. And it's not gratuitous. It has a point. It has a metaphorical point. It's about one homeless down-and-out guy trying to make another homeless down-and-out guy see, metaphors, see that they are both oppressed by an elite. It's great fun. Put the glasses on. Now, I've got to choose between my top 2. Give me a moment here. It's like choosing between 2 children. Okay, I'm going to do it. The Fog. I first saw this movie, as I said, when I was about 10, and it really, really scared me. Nowadays, I find it more funny. That's the beauty of a great horror film, I think. When you first watch them, they're very scary. When you next watch them, they're very interesting. The next time you watch them, you enjoy the way that they're made and the intelligence of the way they're made. And then you can make fun of them and play with them. And that's this movie. I've seen this movie well over 30 times, maybe 40 times. When I was a teenager, I liked this movie so much, I watched it so often on VHS, that I could memorise the entire soundtrack. True fact. I'm not just talking about the dialogue. I'm also talking about the music. I'm also talking about the sound. And that was one of the things that first obsessed me about this film. It wasn't the fantastic story of these zombies coming up from the ocean to take revenge on this small Californian town, which is good enough in itself. It wasn't just the fantastic visuals of this white glowing fog coming into town. What obsessed me was the soundtrack. The way that the brilliant synth music bled into the sound of the foghorn. The way you could hear, just if you listened very carefully, the sound of a cutlass or a sword being dragged along the road. The sound of the crunching of people as they had boat hooks ripped into them. The sound in this movie absolutely obsessed me to the point where the sound and the music became the same thing. And that's what I really became fascinated by with this movie. It's a great story. It has wonderful scenes. And going back to what I was saying about horror movies, the great thing about these scenes is they're very scary the first time you see them and incredibly compelling, and very funny the second time you see them. So, for example, the classic scene where the fog comes inland and Adrienne Barbeau is in her lighthouse on the radio saying, "The fog's now coming in. It's coming down the beach. It's coming up Brook Street. Now it's going down the Bakers. Now it's popped into the Butchers." You'll know the scene I mean if you've seen it. It's very silly and very funny when you've watched it about 20 times. But I love this film. I'm amazed that people don't regard this more highly. It's one of the great horror films. It's one of the great Carpenter films. I could sit down and watch it right now again for the 41st time. I love it. But my number one, I could not, The Thing. This movie is so fantastic and so important to me. I don't really know what to say about it. But let's start with the cast. About a group of men in the Antarctic, and they're all men. You couldn't do that now. But they're all men, and they are in an Antarctic research station. Suddenly, there's an incident. A Norwegian helicopter pilot from another base further on tries to kill a dog in the snow. They rescue the dog. Unbeknownst to them, the dog is a thing, an alien creature in camouflage. And slowly it will camouflage itself through them, taking on their form. The casting. This is where Carpenter is such a brilliant director. Every single one of the men in that film is expertly cast. You know them, even after they've only had a few lines of dialogue. Through the way they act, their body language, their clothing, the way they look, the way they speak. You just know them. You know, you feel you could turn up to that Antarctic Research Centre and talk to them and know their response. This is in a 90-minute movie, a sci-fi movie moving at a lick. It's incredible. The opening of the movie is so clever. It starts in media res. The alien has already arrived. It's already been found in the ice by the Norwegians. That's already happened. Now the last of the Norwegians is desperately trying to kill the alien before it gets to the Americans. So you start with this guy in a helicopter trying to kill a dog and you think, what the hell's happening? Great opening to a movie. It also has a great ending. Nothing is resolved. Two men lying broken in the snow, sharing a bottle of whiskey, waiting for the other to turn into the thing. Great stuff. I could go on about this film all day. I've watched it about 40 times. It still gets to me. You know the middle part of the film, those of you who've seen it, the middle part of the film where Kurt Russell's character sees that the light in his shack is still on and he goes up to the shack and then Fuchs, I love all the names of the characters, Fuchs, McCready. Fuchs sees Mac or someone go past his door and he goes out into the snow and he finds McCready's pants in the snow and everything goes batshit crazy and you don't know who's who. And then, the young black guy comes back and says, I cut McCready loose by the shack, and and it all goes absolutely mad, I still get caught up in it. That's the measure of a great film. This was Carpenter's high point. It was a disaster for him. It was a huge flop. The critics absolutely slayed him for it because he dared to remake a Howard Hawks movie. His great hero, ironically. But you know what? Time has been kind to the thing, and we now recognise it as a masterpiece. It is one of the great films of the 1980s, and I think it's Carpenter's finest film. I love it to bits. Well, thank you very much for watching. Let me know what your Carpenter ranking is at the bottom. Have I missed anything out? I'm sure I have, but let me know, and I'll see you next time.